The conference room smelled of leather and ambition, 20 floors above the city that never noticed when dreams died. I sat at the far end of the mahogany table, my hands folded in my lap, watching my boss Marcus Sterling adjust his platinum cufflinks for the third time. He did that when he was nervous, though he'd never admit it. "Gentlemen," Marcus began, his voice carrying that practiced authority that had built Sterling Dynamics from a garage startup to a tech empire. "Today's patent hearing is merely a formality. The neural interface technology belongs to our company, and we're here to ensure that remains clear." I studied the faces around the table, patent attorneys in charcoal suits, their briefcases worth more than most people's cars. The patent examiner, Dr. Helena Walsh, sat with her silver hair pulled back severely, her eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. And across from us, the client who had requested this meeting, Jonathan Chen, CEO of Meridian Technologies, the company that wanted to license our breakthrough. Marcus had insisted I attend, though he'd made it clear I was here as a courtesy. Technical support, he'd called it, as if 5 years of my life poured into this invention could be reduced to mere support. The neural interface patent as patent 112478993 represented everything I'd dreamed of since graduate school. A direct brain-computer connection that could help paralyzed patients control devices with thought alone. I'd worked 18-hour days, slept in the lab, missed my sister's wedding, all to make this technology real. "The invention timeline is clear," Marcus continued, sliding a folder across the table. "Conception began in January 2019, with full development completed by our team in December 2022. Dr. Walsh opened the folder, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Sterling, I noticed the primary inventor listed on the patent application is Dr. Sarah Chen." She glanced at me, "who I assume is present today." "Dr. Chen is one of our valued employees," Marcus replied smoothly. "She contributed to the technical implementation under company direction and resources." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Contributed to the technical implementation. As if the late nights solving impossible equations were just contributions. As if the breakthrough moment when I realized how to stabilize the neural signal was just implementation. Jonathan Chen leaned forward, his dark eyes moving between Marcus and me. "Mr. Sterling, I've reviewed the patent documentation extensively. The technical depth suggests this wasn't a team effort. Someone with extraordinary expertise in bioelectronics and neural pathway mapping created this. Our company has many talented individuals," Marcus said, his smile tight. "Dr. Chen certainly played her part." Played her part. I stared at my hands, remembering the night I'd finally cracked the signal processing algorithm. I'd been alone in the lab at AM, surrounded by empty coffee cups and failed prototypes. When the solution came to me, I'd actually cried, not from exhaustion, but from the pure joy of knowing this could change lives. "Dr. Chen," Dr. Walsh addressed me directly, "can you walk us through the core innovation that makes this patent unique?" I looked up, meeting her gaze. The breakthrough was realizing that neural signals needed to be processed in real time using a quantum-enhanced filtering system. Previous attempts failed because they tried to translate brain waves directly, but the brain doesn't think in binary. It thinks in probability clouds. The room fell silent. Even Marcus stopped fidgeting with his cufflinks. "The quantum processor creates a bridge," I continued, my voice growing stronger. "It doesn't just read thoughts, it learns the unique neural signature of each user and adapts. That's why our system works when others don't." Jonathan Chen nodded slowly. "That level of innovation, that's not something you develop by committee." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Mr. Chen, I appreciate your interest in the technical details, but the business reality is simple. Dr. Chen is an employee. Her work belongs to Sterling Dynamics. She's replaceable." The word hung in the air like a slap. Replaceable. 5 years of my life. My breakthrough. My dreams replaceable. Dr. Walsh set down her pen and looked directly at Marcus. "Mr. Sterling, there seems to be some confusion about the patent ownership." "No confusion at all," Marcus replied. "Sterling Dynamics funded the research, provided the laboratory, paid Dr. Chen's salary. Standard employment contract assigns all intellectual property to the company. I felt the walls of the conference room closing in. This was at the moment I'd feared since the patent application was filed. Marcus was going to take credit for my life's work, reduce me to a footnote in my own invention. But Dr. Walsh was opening another folder, one I didn't recognize. "Mr. Sterling," she said quietly, "I think you should review these documents before we proceed." Marcus reached for the folder with the confidence of a man who'd never been challenged in a boardroom. His fingers drummed against the mahogany as he opened it, his eyes scanning the first page. I watched his expression change: confusion, then concern, then something approaching panic. "I don't understand," he said, his voice losing its practiced smoothness. "What are these documents?" Dr. Walsh folded her hands. "Patent application records, Mr. Sterling, filed 18 months before Dr. Chen joined Sterling Dynamics." The silence in the room was deafening. I could hear the air conditioning humming, the distant sound of traffic 20 floors below, my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. "That's impossible," Marcus whispered, but his certainty was cracking like ice in spring. I stared at the folder, my mind racing. 18 months before I joined Sterling Dynamics. That would put it back to my graduate research. The work I'd done at MIT under Professor Harrison, the theoretical framework that had consumed my final year. "Dr. Chen," Dr. Walsh said gently, "did you file any preliminary patent applications during your doctoral studies?" My mouth felt dry. Professor Harrison encouraged all his students to document our research. He said even theoretical work could be valuable someday. "Theoretical work?" Jonathan Chen repeated, leaning forward. "Mr. Sterling, you told us this technology was developed entirely within your company." Marcus was frantically flipping through the documents now, his face growing paler with each page. "This is just academic theory. The practical application, the actual device that was all developed at Sterling Dynamics, actually," Dr. Walsh said, pulling out another document. "The practical application appears to be a direct implementation of the theoretical framework." "Dr. Chen, do you recognize patent application 16-892-445? I took the paper with trembling hands. The title read, "Quantum Enhanced Neural Interface System for Direct Brain-Computer Communication," filed March 15, 2018. My name was listed as the sole inventor. "I remember filing this," I said slowly, the memory surfacing like something from a dream. "Professor Harrison said it was too advanced for current technology, but that I should protect the intellectual property anyway." "I never thought." "You never thought it would become real," Jonathan Chen finished. "But it did. You made it real." Marcus slammed his hand on the table. "This is ridiculous. She was my employee. She used our resources, our laboratory, our funding to implement her own previously patented technology," Dr. Walsh interrupted. "Mr. Sterling, employment contracts cannot assign rights to intellectual property that predates the employment relationship." I felt like I was floating above the scene, watching it happen to someone else. The patent application in my hands was proof of something I'd almost forgotten, that once, before the corporate world had worn me down, I'd been brilliant enough to imagine the impossible. Furthermore, Dr. Walsh continued, "Dr. Chen's original patent application includes specific implementation details that match exactly with the current device. The quantum filtering algorithm, the neural adaptation protocols, even the hardware specifications, they're all here, documented years before Sterling Dynamics claimed to have invented them." Marcus looked like a man watching his empire crumble. "But the funding, the development costs, we invested millions in bringing Dr. Chen's invention to market," Jonathan Chen said quietly, "which makes Sterling Dynamics a manufacturer, not an inventor." I thought about all the times Marcus had taken credit for our breakthrough in board meetings, all the interviews where he'd spoken about his revolutionary technology. I remembered the company Christmas party where he'd raised a toast to Sterling Dynamics innovation, while I stood in the corner, invisible. "Dr. Chen," Dr. Walsh said, "as the original patent holder, you have several options. You could license the technology to Sterling Dynamics, you could revoke their rights entirely, or you could transfer the patent to another entity." The room fell silent again. 20 floors below, the city continued its relentless motion, unaware that in this conference room, The balance of power had just shifted completely. Marcus was staring at me now, his face a mixture of desperation and disbelief. Sarah, be reasonable. We can work something out. A partnership, profit sharing, she's replaceable, I said quietly, repeating his words from minutes earlier. Isn't that what you said? The color drained from his face. I didn't mean you did mean it, I replied, my voice steady now. You've always meant it. I looked around the table at these powerful men in their expensive suits, men who had spent their careers taking credit for other people's brilliance. For 5 years, I'd let them make me believe I was small, that my contributions were minor, that I was lucky just to be in the room. But the patent application in my hands told a different story. It told the story of a young woman who had imagined a technology that could change the world, who had been brilliant enough to document every detail, who had protected her intellectual property even when she didn't fully understand its value. Mr. Chen, I said, turning to face the client who had requested this meeting, you mentioned you were interested in licensing this technology. Jonathan Chen's eyes lit up with understanding. Dr. Chen, Meridian Technologies would be very interested in discussing licensing arrangements with the actual patent holder. Marcus shot to his feet, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Now wait just a minute. Sarah, you can't be serious. After everything Sterling Dynamics has done for you, everything you've done for me? I stood slowly, the patent documents still clutched in my hands. You mean paying me a fraction of what my male colleagues earned? Taking credit for my work in every presentation? Or perhaps you mean the performance review where you said I lacked executive presence? The words came out calm, measured, but I could feel 5 years of suppressed frustration flowing through them like electricity through a wire. Dr. Walsh was taking notes, her pen moving steadily across the page. For the record, Dr. Chen, you are confirming that you wish to exercise your rights as the original patent holder. I am, I said, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. Marcus turned to his lawyers, desperation creeping into his voice. There has to be something. Employment contracts, non-compete clauses, Mr. Sterling, one of his attorneys said quietly. Non-compete clauses cannot prevent someone from licensing their own intellectual property, and employment contracts cannot retroactively assign rights to patents filed before employment began. Jonathan Chen was studying me with new interest. Dr. Chen, I have to ask, why didn't you assert these rights earlier? You've been working at Sterling Dynamics for 5 years. I thought about that question, really thought about it. Why hadn't I? The answer came slowly, like dawn breaking over a landscape I'd forgotten existed. Because I forgot who I was, I said finally. When you're told you're replaceable often enough, you start to believe it. When your ideas are presented as someone else's innovation, you begin to think maybe you didn't really create them. When you're the only woman in every room, you learn to make yourself smaller, to take up less space. The conference room had become a confessional, and I was finally telling the truth. I convinced myself that my graduate work was just theoretical, that Marcus and his team had done the real work of making it practical. But looking at these documents, I held up the patent application. Every algorithm, every hardware specification, every breakthrough that made this technology possible, it's all here. I didn't just contribute to this invention. I am this invention. Marcus slumped back into his chair, the fight going out of him. Sarah, please. The company will collapse without this patent. Hundreds of jobs will be preserved. Jonathan Chen interrupted. When Meridian Technologies licenses the technology and brings it to market properly. Dr. Chen, our company specializes in medical devices. We understand the life-changing potential of your neural interface system. I looked at Jonathan Chen, seeing something in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. Respect. Not the patronizing acknowledgement Marcus gave me in meetings, but genuine professional respect. What kind of licensing arrangement did you have in mind? I asked. Full licensing rights with you maintaining ownership of the core patent. Meridian would handle manufacturing, distribution, and regulatory approval. You would receive licensing fees, royalties, and if you're interested, a position as Chief Technology Officer overseeing the development. Chief Technology Officer. The title hung in the air like a promise. Marcus made one last desperate attempt. Sarah, think about this rationally. Sterling Dynamics is an established company. We have infrastructure, Relationships, you have my technology, I said quietly. And you've spent 5 years trying to make me forget it was mine. Dr. Walsh closed her folder with a soft snap. Dr. Chen, do you need time to consider your options? I looked around the conference room one more time at Marcus, pale and defeated, at his lawyers, frantically whispering among themselves, at Jonathan Chen, waiting patiently for my decision. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the city sprawling below, full of possibility. For 5 years, I had sat in rooms like this one, invisible despite my brilliance, replaceable despite my irreplaceable contributions. I had let other people define my worth, measure my value, decide my future. No, I said, my voice clear and strong. I don't need time. I turned to Jonathan Chen. Mr. Chen, I accept your proposal. I would like to discuss the details of licensing my patent to Meridian Technologies. The silence that followed was different from the earlier silences. This one was full of recognition, of power shifting, of a brilliant woman finally reclaiming what had always been hers. Marcus stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. You're making a mistake, Sarah. You'll regret this. The only thing I regret, I said, gathering the patent documents, is waiting so long to remember who I am. The weeks that followed felt like waking up from a long, gray dream. I cleaned out my office at Sterling Dynamics on a Tuesday morning, packing 5 years of my life into 3 cardboard boxes. Marcus didn't speak to me, but I caught him watching from his corner office as I carried my personal items to the elevator. The neural interface prototypes came with me, of course. They were mine, had always been mine, though it had taken a patent hearing for the world to acknowledge that truth. I held the latest model in my hands as I waited for the elevator, its sleek titanium surface reflecting the fluorescent lights. Such a small device to contain so much of my soul. Meridian Technologies occupied an entire floor of a glass building in the biotech district, where the walls were white and clean and the air hummed with possibility. Jonathan Chen met me at the reception desk on my first day, his handshake firm and respectful. Dr. Chen, he said, and I noticed he used my title naturally, without the slight hesitation I'd grown accustomed to at Sterling Dynamics. Welcome to your new laboratory. The lab was everything I'd dreamed of during those late nights at Sterling's state-of-the-art equipment, unlimited research budget, and a team of engineers who looked at me with genuine curiosity rather than barely concealed skepticism. When I explained the quantum filtering algorithm to them, they took notes. When I suggested modifications to the neural adaptation protocols, they listened. But it was the patience that changed everything. Maria Santos was the first. Paralyzed from the chest down after a car accident, she'd volunteered for our clinical trial with the kind of desperate hope that made my chest tight. I watched from the observation room as the surgical team implanted the neural interface, my hands pressed against the glass. Dr. Chen, the lead surgeon, said through the intercom, "We're ready for initial calibration." I entered the surgical suite, my heart pounding. Maria was awake, her dark eyes alert despite the local anesthesia. The neural interface was barely visible beneath her scalp, just a small bump covered by surgical tape. "Maria," I said softly, "we're going to start with simple thoughts. I want you to imagine moving your right hand." She closed her eyes, concentrating. On the monitor, neural signals flickered to life, chaotic at first, then gradually forming patterns as the quantum processor learned her unique brain signature. "Now imagine reaching for something," I continued. "Maybe a glass of water." The robotic arm beside her bed jerked slightly, then smoothed into fluid motion. Maria's eyes flew open as the mechanical hand reached toward an imaginary glass, following the exact trajectory her brain had commanded. "I can feel it," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I can feel my hand moving again. I had to step outside the surgical suite, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what we'd accomplished. In the hallway, I leaned against the wall and cried, not from sadness, but from the pure joy of knowing that my invention, my years of work, were finally helping someone live again. The clinical trials continued through the spring. James Morrison, a veteran who'd lost the use of his legs to a night explosion, learned to control a wheelchair with his thoughts. Sarah Kim, born with spina bifida, used the interface to paint digital masterpieces by imagining the movement of brush strokes. Each success felt like vindication, not just of the technology, but of the young woman who'd filed that first patent application in graduate school. She'd been right to document her ideas, right to protect her intellectual property, right to believe that impossible things could become real. The media attention came gradually, then all at once. Revolutionary neural interface gives hope to paralyzed patients, read the headline in the New England Journal of Medicine. Breakthrough technology allows direct brain control of devices, announced the tech blogs. In every article, my name appeared first. Dr. Sarah Chen, inventor. Dr. Sarah Chen, Chief Technology Officer. Dr. Sarah Chen, the brilliant mind behind the quantum neural interface. I kept the newspaper clippings in a folder on my desk, not out of vanity, but as a reminder. When the world tried to make you invisible, documentation became an act of revolution. The call from the Nobel Committee came on a Thursday afternoon in October. I was in the lab, working on improvements to the signal processing algorithm, when my assistant knocked on the door. Dr. Chen? There's a call from Stockholm. They say it's important. I almost laughed. Stockholm could only mean one thing. Dr. Chen. The voice on the phone was formal, accented. This is Dr. Eric Lindahl from the Nobel Committee for Physiology or Medicine. I'm calling to inform you that you have been selected as this year's recipient for your groundbreaking work in neural interface technology. The lab fell silent around me. My research team had stopped their work to listen, their faces bright with excitement and pride. The committee was particularly impressed. Dr. Lindahl continued, by the elegance of your quantum filtering solution and its immediate practical applications for patients with paralysis. Your work represents exactly the kind of innovation the Nobel Prize was created to recognize. After I hung up, the lab erupted in cheers. Jonathan Chen appeared with champagne, and someone had already updated the company website to read Home of Nobel laureate Dr. Sarah Chen, but the moment I treasured most came later that evening when I was alone in my office. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Saw the news about the Nobel Prize. Congratulations. You were never replaceable. M's Marcus Sterling. Even in defeat, he couldn't quite bring himself to apologize. But the admission was there. I had never been replaceable. I had always been irreplaceable. I deleted the message without responding and turned back to my work. There were more patients waiting, more lives to change, more impossible things to make real. Outside my office window, the city sparkled in the darkness, full of dreamers and inventors and brilliant minds who hadn't yet learned to make themselves small. Somewhere out there, a young woman was probably working late in a laboratory, pursuing an idea that seemed impossible, documenting her thoughts in case they mattered someday. I hoped she would remember, when the world tried to diminish her, that brilliance could not be contained, that innovation could not be stolen, and that some things, the most important things, were truly irreplaceable. The neural interface hummed quietly on my desk, a small titanium testament to the power of refusing to be forgotten. The Nobel ceremony in Stockholm felt like stepping into a dream I'd never dared to have. The concert hall glowed with golden light, filled with royalty, diplomats, and the world's most brilliant minds. I sat in the front row wearing a midnight blue gown, the weight of the moment settling around me like silk. When King Carl XV Gustaf placed a Nobel medal in my hands, I thought of the young graduate student who had filed that first patent application 7 years ago. She had been so uncertain then, documenting her wild theories about quantum neural interfaces while Professor Harrison smiled indulgently and told her to think practically. Dr. Chen, the king said in perfect English, your work has given hope to millions who thought they would never move again. You have bridged a gap between mind and machine with extraordinary grace. The medal was heavier than I'd expected, its gold surface engraved with the profile of Alfred Nobel. As I held it, I could feel the weight of every late night in the laboratory, every failed prototype, every moment when I doubted myself. The standing ovation seemed to last forever. In the audience, I spotted Jonathan Chen and my research team from Meridian, their faces bright with pride. My parents had flown in from California, my mother dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Even Professor Harrison was there, older now but beaming as if he'd always known this day would come. But it was the empty seat in the third row that caught my attention. The placard read Sterling Dynamics, but Marcus hadn't come. Perhaps he couldn't bear to watch his replaceable employee accept the world's highest scientific honor. The Nobel lecture came the next day. I stood at the podium in the Aula Magna, looking out at an audience of Nobel laureates, scientists, and journalists from around the world. My hands were steady as I began to speak. 7 years ago, I was a graduate student with an impossible idea, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the hall. I wanted to create a direct connection between the human brain and the digital world, not just to read thoughts, but to translate them into action with the precision and nuance of natural movement. I clicked to my first slide, showing the original pattern diagrams I'd sketched by hand in my MIT dormitory. The breakthrough came when I realized that the brain doesn't think in the binary language of computers. It thinks in probability clouds, in quantum states that exist in superposition until the moment of decision. To truly interface with the brain, technology had to learn to think like the brain, not in certainties, but in possibilities. The audience was completely silent, absorbed in the technical details that had consumed my life for so many years. But the real validation of this work didn't come in a laboratory, I continued. It came when Maria Santos, paralyzed for 3 years, used her thoughts to reach for her daughter's hand. It came when James Morrison painted his first digital landscape by imagining the sweep of a brush. It came when Sarah Kim wrote her name in the air using only the power of her mind. I clicked to a video of Maria in her home, using the neural interface to operate a robotic arm that helped her cook dinner for her family. The audience watched in rapt attention as she stirred soup with fluid, natural movements, her face bright with concentration and joy. This technology exists because I was taught to document my ideas, to protect my intellectual property, and to never stop believing that impossible things could become real. But it succeeded because I learned to remember who I was, not who others told me I should be. After the lecture, the reception buzzed with conversations in a dozen languages. Scientists approached me with questions about the quantum algorithms, venture capitalists inquired about licensing opportunities, and patients' families thanked me with tears in their eyes. I was standing by the windows overlooking Stockholm's harbor when a familiar voice spoke behind me. Quite a journey from that conference room, isn't it? I turned to find Dr. Helena Walsh, the patent examiner who had changed my life, with a folder of forgotten documents. She looked elegant in a charcoal dress, her silver hair catching the light from the chandeliers. Dr. Walsh, I said, genuinely surprised. I didn't expect to see you here. The Nobel Committee invited me as part of their intellectual property review panel, she explained. Your case has become something of a landmark in patent law. We use it now to teach young examiners about the importance of thorough documentation. She raised her champagne glass in a small toast. To the power of proper paperwork. I laughed, remembering that terrifying moment when she'd opened the folder that contained my forgotten patent application. I still can't believe I almost lost everything because I forgot I'd filed that application. You didn't forget, Dr. Walsh said gently. You were made to forget. There's a difference. Her words hit me with unexpected force. She was right. I hadn't simply forgotten about my graduate work. I'd been systematically conditioned to minimize my contributions, to see myself as a small part of someone else's vision rather than the architect of my own breakthrough. How many other brilliant minds are sitting in conference rooms right now? I wondered aloud, letting other people take credit for their innovations. Too many, Doctor. Walsh replied, but perhaps your story will inspire them to remember who they are. The evening wound down with more congratulations, more photographs, more promises to collaborate on future research. As I finally returned to my hotel room, I found a stack of messages waiting for me. The first was from Maria Santos. Dr. Chen, I watched your Nobel lecture online. Thank you for never giving up on impossible things. My daughter and I are so proud to know you. The second was from my research team. Boss, we're already back in the lab working on the next breakthrough. The neural interface 2.0 is going to be even more amazing. Can't wait for you to get home. The third was from Professor Harrison. Sarah, I always knew you were destined for greatness, but even I underestimated just how great. Your parents must be bursting with pride. I certainly am. and at the bottom of the stack, printed on Sterling Dynamics letterhead, was a formal letter. Dr. Chen, Sterling Dynamics would like to formally apologize for any misunderstanding regarding the ownership of the neural interface patent. We would be honored to discuss potential collaboration opportunities at your convenience. We recognize that your contributions were far more significant than we initially acknowledged. Sincerely, Marcus Sterling, CEO. I read the letter twice, then set it aside. Some apologies came too late, and some bridges, once burned, couldn't be rebuilt with corporate letterhead and careful phrasing. Instead, I picked up my phone and called my parents. Mom, it's Sarah. Yes, I'm still in Stockholm. No, I can't believe it either. My mother's voice was thick with emotion. Sweetheart, we watched a ceremony on television. When the king gave you that medal, your father and I just held each other and cried. I wish you could have been there, I said, settling into the hotel room's plush armchair. We were there. My father's voice came through the speaker. We've been there every step of the way. Even when you forgot how brilliant you are, I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the Nobel medal where it sat on the nightstand. Tomorrow I would fly home to California, back to my laboratory and my patients and the endless work of turning impossible dreams into reality. But tonight, I was simply Sarah Chen, the girl who had once believed she could build a bridge between minds and machines, who had documented that belief in a patent application, and who had never truly been replaceable, even when the world tried to convince her otherwise. The neural interface technology would help thousands of patients in the years to come. But perhaps its greatest achievement was simpler. It had reminded one brilliant woman that she was worth remembering. The call came on a Tuesday morning, 3 months after Stockholm. I was in my laboratory at Meridian, calibrating a new neural interface prototype, when my assistant knocked urgently on the door. Dr. Chen, there's someone here to see you. She says it's about your patent. I looked up from the delicate circuitry, my hand still steady despite the sudden chill in my chest. What kind of someone? A lawyer. She looks serious. The woman waiting in my office wore a navy suit and carried herself with the kind of precision that suggested expensive legal training. Her briefcase sat perfectly aligned on my desk, and her smile was professionally warm but utterly cold. Dr. Chen, I'm Rebecca Morrison from Hartwell, Klein and Associates. We represent Sterling Dynamics in intellectual property matters. I remained standing, not offering her a seat. I thought we'd resolved all intellectual property matters. The patent ownership is clear. Actually, that's what I'm here to discuss. She opened her briefcase with surgical precision. My client has discovered some irregularities in your original patent filing. The word hung in the air like a threat. I felt my stomach drop, but kept my expression neutral. What kind of irregularities? Your graduate advisor, Professor Harrison, has come forward with some concerning information. She slid a document across my desk. It appears your original patent application may have included research that was conducted under university auspices, using university resources. I picked up the document with hands that I willed to remain steady. It was a sworn affidavit from Professor Harrison, my mentor, the man who had encouraged me to file that first patent application. Dr. Chen's research was conducted in my laboratory using MIT equipment and funding, the statement read. Under university policy, any intellectual property developed using institutional resources belongs to the institution. I was not aware she had filed individual patent claims on work that should have been assigned to MIT. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Professor Harrison, the man who had smiled proudly at the Nobel ceremony, who had sent me congratulatory messages, had signed a document that could destroy everything I'd built. This is ridiculous, I said, but my voice sounded thin even to my own ears. Professor Harrison encouraged me to file that patent. He reviewed the application himself. Rebecca Morrison's smile sharpened. Unfortunately, Professor Harrison's memory of events differs from yours, and MIT has confirmed that your research was indeed conducted using university resources during your graduate studies. I sank into my chair, the implications crashing over me like a wave. If the original patent was invalid due to improper assignment, then everything that followed the licensing deal with Meridian, the Nobel Prize, my entire career renaissance could be called into question. What does Sterling Dynamics want? I asked quietly. A reasonable settlement. Recognition that the neural interface technology was developed through collaborative efforts involving multiple institutions and individuals. A more equitable distribution of patent rights. Equitable. The word tasted bitter in my mouth. Marcus Sterling wanted his revenge, and he'd found the perfect weapon, the very mentor who had launched my career. I need to see Professor Harrison, I said. I'm afraid that won't be possible. Professor Harrison is quite elderly now, and his health has been declining. He's not taking meetings. Of course he wasn't. I stared at the affidavit, at the signature I'd seen on hundreds of recommendation letters and research papers. Had he really betrayed me? Or was this something else entirely? Dr. Chen, Rebecca Morrison continued, this doesn't have to be adversarial. Sterling Dynamics is prepared to offer you a generous settlement. You would retain credit as co-inventor, receive substantial royalties, and continue your work at Meridian. All we ask is recognition that this technology had multiple contributors, co-inventor. After everything I'd been through, after the Nobel Prize and the patients whose lives had been transformed, Marcus Sterling still wanted to reduce me to a footnote in my own story. I need time to consider this, I said. Of course. But I should mention that MIT is also reviewing their intellectual property policies. If this matter becomes public, it could affect your Nobel Prize eligibility. The committee takes a very dim view of disputed patent claims. The threat was clear. Settle quietly, or watch my reputation crumble in a very public scandal. After she left, I sat alone in my office, staring at Professor Harrison's affidavit. The man who had shaped my career, who had taught me to dream big and document everything, had signed a statement that could destroy me. I picked up my phone and dialed MIT. Professor Harrison's office. This is Dr. Sarah Chen. I need to speak with Professor Harrison immediately. I'm sorry, Dr. Chen, but Professor Harrison isn't taking calls. He's been quite unwell. This is urgent. It's about my patent work. There was a long pause. Dr. Chen, I think you should know Professor Harrison has been in a memory care facility for the past 6 months. Early stage Alzheimer's. He hasn't been reviewing any legal documents. The phone slipped from my hand, clattering onto my desk. Professor Harrison had Alzheimer's. He couldn't have signed that affidavit, at least, not with full understanding of what he was signing. I thought about Rebecca Morrison's polished presentation, her careful words about Professor Harrison's declining health and inability to take meetings. Sterling Dynamics hadn't just found a weapon against me, they'd exploited a brilliant man's deteriorating mind to create one. The rage that filled me was different from anything I'd felt before. It wasn't the slow burn of being overlooked or dismissed. It was the white-hot fury of watching someone I loved being used as a tool for my destruction. I opened my laptop and began typing. If Marcus Sterling wanted a war over intellectual property, he was about to discover that Nobel laureates had resources he'd never imagined. The first email went to Dr. Walsh at the patent office. The second went to my lawyers at Meridian. The third went to the investigative journalist who had covered my Nobel Prize story. By evening, I had assembled a team that would make Sterling Dynamics corporate lawyers look like amateur hour. But more importantly, I had a plan that would expose not just the fraudulent affidavit, but the systematic exploitation of elderly academics that companies like Sterling Dynamics had been getting away with for years. Professor Harrison had taught me to document everything. Now I was going to use that lesson to protect him and destroy the people who had tried to use his illness against us both. The neural interface hummed quietly on my desk, its quantum processors calculating probability clouds with perfect precision. Some outcomes, I realized, were more certain than others. Marcus Sterling was about to learn that when you tried to replace the irreplaceable, the universe had a way of correcting the error. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, but the weight of what was happening filled every corner. Federal Judge Patricia Hawkins presided with the kind of quiet authority that made even the most expensive lawyers speak in respectful tones. I sat at the plaintiff's table, flanked by my legal team, watching as the truth slowly dismantled Sterling Dynamics' carefully constructed lies. Your Honor, my lead attorney, David Kim, addressed the court, We have compelling evidence that the defendant not only forged documents using Professor Harrison's signature, but systematically exploited his deteriorating mental condition to manufacture a false intellectual property claim. On the defendant's side, Marcus Sterling sat rigid in his chair, his face pale beneath his expensive tan. Rebecca Morrison shuffled through papers with the desperate energy of someone watching their case collapse in real time. "Dr. Chen," Judge Hawkins said, "please approach the witness stand." I walked across the courtroom, my heels clicking against the marble floor. Through the tall windows, I could see protesters outside, patients and families holding signs that read "Protect Dr. Chen's patent" and "Neural interfaces save lives." The technology that had started as a graduate student's impossible dream had become a symbol of something larger, the right of inventors to own their innovations. "Dr. Chen," David Kim began, "can you tell the court about your relationship with Professor Harrison?" "Professor Harrison was my doctoral advisor at MIT," I said, my voice steady. "He was more than a mentor, he was like a father to me. He encouraged my research into neural interfaces when other faculty members thought it was too ambitious. He personally reviewed my patent application and encouraged me to file it." "And when did you last speak with Professor Harrison about your patent work?" "At the Nobel ceremony in Stockholm. He was lucid, proud, and completely supportive of my achievements. He never mentioned any concerns about the patent ownership." David Kim nodded and turned to the judge. "Your Honor, we'd like to present evidence regarding Professor Harrison's medical condition. The neurologist's testimony was devastating to Sterling Dynamics' case." Dr. Elizabeth Santos, who had been treating Professor Harrison for 18 months, explained that his Alzheimer's had progressed to the point where he could no longer understand complex legal documents. "Professor Harrison's condition began deteriorating approximately 2 years ago," Dr. Santos testified. "By the time this affidavit was allegedly signed, he would have been incapable of comprehending its implications. He's been in memory care for 8 months." Rebecca Morrison stood to cross-examine, but her questions were weak, desperate. "Doctor, isn't it possible that Professor Harrison had moments of clarity? Not regarding complex intellectual property matters. No, his short-term memory is severely compromised, and he often doesn't recognize his own family members." The handwriting expert came next, a woman whose testimony felt like watching a master class in forensic analysis. She projected enlarged images of Professor Harrison's signature onto screens around the courtroom. "The signature on the Sterling Dynamics affidavit shows clear signs of forgery," she explained, pointing to subtle differences in pen pressure and letter formation. Comparing it to authentic signatures from the same time period, the discrepancies are unmistakable. This signature was either traced or produced by someone attempting to replicate Professor Harrison's handwriting. I watched Marcus Sterling's face as the evidence mounted against him. The man who had called me replaceable was watching his own empire become expendable, one expert witness at a time. But it was the final piece of evidence that sealed his fate. "Your Honor," David Kim said, "we have security footage from the memory care facility showing that Professor Harrison never left the premises on the date he allegedly signed this affidavit." The video played on the courtroom screen's grainy surveillance footage showing Professor Harrison in the facility's garden, confused and frail, being gently guided by a nurse. The timestamp showed the exact date and time when he was supposedly signing legal documents in Sterling Dynamics offices. The silence in the courtroom was profound. Judge Hawkins looked from the video to Marcus Sterling with an expression of barely contained disgust. "Mr. Sterling," she said, "do you have any explanation for how your company obtained a signature from a man who was clearly incapacitated and physically unable to travel to your offices?" Marcus Sterling stood slowly, his expensive suit unable to hide the fact that he was a broken man. "Your Honor, we relied on our legal team's due diligence. If there were irregularities, Judge Hawkins' voice cut through his stammering. "Mr. Sterling, this court finds clear evidence of document forgery, elder abuse, and fraudulent legal claims. This is not an irregularity, this is criminal behavior." The judge's ruling was swift and comprehensive. Sterling Dynamics was ordered to pay damages not just to me, but to Professor Harrison's family for the exploitation of his condition. The company's assets were frozen pending a criminal investigation. and Marcus Sterling himself faced potential federal charges for fraud and elder abuse. But more importantly, my patent rights were not just confirmed, they were strengthened. The court's ruling established new precedents for protecting elderly academics from corporate exploitation and affirmed that intellectual property rights could not be stolen through forged documents and manufactured controversies. As I left the courthouse, the crowd of supporters erupted in cheers. Maria Santos was there, tears streaming down her face as she operated her robotic arm to wave at me. James Morrison had painted a banner that read, "Thank you, Dr. Chen," in bold, beautiful strokes created entirely through neural interface technology. Jonathan Chen met me at the courthouse steps, his face bright with relief and pride. "Sarah, it's over. You've won everything: your patent, your reputation, your future." But as I looked back at the courthouse, I thought about Professor Harrison in his memory care facility, probably unaware that his name had been used as a weapon against his favorite student. The victory felt hollow without being able to share it with the man who had made it all possible. "I need to see him," I said. The memory care facility was quiet and peaceful, filled with soft music and the gentle voices of caregivers. Professor Harrison sat in a sunlit room, staring out at a garden where autumn leaves drifted slowly to the ground. "Professor," I said softly, sitting beside him. He turned to look at me, his eyes unfocused for a moment before a spark of recognition flickered across his face. "Sarah," he said, his voice thin but warm. "My brilliant Sarah, did you solve the impossible problem?" I took his hand, feeling how fragile it had become. "Yes, Professor, I solved it. The neural interface works. People are walking again, painting again, living again." He smiled, and for a moment, he was the man who had believed in my impossible dreams. "I always knew you would change the world. Document everything I told you. Protect your ideas." "I did," I whispered, "and I protected you too." He squeezed my hand with surprising strength. "Good girl. Never let them make you small." As I drove home that evening, I thought about the journey that had brought me here, from a graduate student with wild theories to a Nobel laureate defending her life's work in federal court. The neural interface technology would continue to evolve, helping more patients reclaim their lives. But perhaps its greatest achievement was simpler. It had proven that brilliance, once documented and protected, could never truly be stolen. The autumn sun was setting as I pulled into my driveway, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Tomorrow I would return to my laboratory, to my patients, to the endless work of turning impossible dreams into reality. But tonight, I was simply Sarah Chen, the woman who had refused to be replaced, who had remembered who she was, and who had learned that some things in this world were truly, permanently irreplaceable. The neural interface in my briefcase hummed quietly, its quantum processors calculating infinite possibilities, each one more beautiful than the last.